Good morning and welcome to Cedar Lane. I'm Kristen Green, your intern minister, and you're so on time this morning. You made it here with the time change of the going to one service, and you made it here past possible delays on the road with the rolling thunder, the cycles filling the highways. You are welcome here, and we are grateful that you made it. Please know that whoever you are, wherever you're from, whoever you love, wherever you are on life's journey, whatever your gender identity, your beliefs, or your immigration status, you are fully welcome here. I also extend a special welcome to those joining us online this morning, or whether in the moment or catching up with us later. We are glad to have you with us as well. If you're new to Cedar Lane and you're comfortable, please raise your hand. We have a small gift for you. Please keep it raised so our ushers can find you. Included with this gift, we have a beautiful brochure that introduces you to Cedar Lane and the ministries here. You can complete that form with your information and put it in the offering plate so that we can get to know you here at Cedar Lane. Let's give our guests a warm Cedar Lane welcome. All of you are invited to stay after the service for coffee and conversation. Visitors, if you choose to use a yellow mug, our Cedar Lane members will know how to greet you because yellow means hello. Yes. Now, I'd like to draw your attention to some of our announcements on our announcement page. We have our lay pastoral visitors who work closely with the ministers to support the pastoral ministry of this congregation. If you have a need or concern this morning, Lata Puturi is here and will be available at the Joys and Sorrows Candles table during and after the service. Now, immediately following this service today, we will go up to the ceremonial memorial garden, the memory garden, the memory wall, and we have a ceremony that we will perform there to dedicate the new plaques on that memory wall. It's right next to the Chalice House. So after the service, after we process, we hope that you'll join us up there at the memory wall for a brief ceremony. Remember, next week is flower communion, so look in your yards, maybe not other people's yards, but find a flower that you can bring to the service and add it to our diverse display that will then go back out into our congregation. Our annual meeting will begin at 11 a.m. on June 2nd, so mark your calendars. That will be right here in the sanctuary. Another announcement is that the Tapestry program, our intergenerational RE experience, will convene for 3 Sundays in June, the 9th, the 16th, and the 23rd. This year's theme is our third principle, acceptance of one another and encouragement for spiritual growth. You can check out the poster in the lounge for more details. There is much happening in the immigration world now, including an impending deportation locally. There are too many details to list, but there is an immigration table in our lounge, and people who have their ear to the ground on what's happening, and they also have some concrete ways that you can impact the decisions. You can call your senators. They have all kinds of information on what you can do as an individual to help these people that are at risk for deportation. In keeping with the spirit of deepening our connection to community, let us now turn and greet our neighbors, especially our guests. Good morning. Good morning. Hello, good morning. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power. Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power. Spirit, draw near.
Young dead soldiers do not speak.
Nevertheless, they are heard in still houses. Who has not heard them?
They have a silence that speaks for them at night, and when the clock counts, they say, "We were young, we have died, remember us."
They say, "We have done what we could, but until it is finished, it is not done." They say, "We've given our lives, but until it is finished, no one can know what our lives gave."
They say, "Our deaths are not ours, they are yours. They will mean what you make them." They say, "Whether our lives and our deaths were for peace and a new hope, or for nothing, we cannot say. It is you who must say this."
They say, "We leave you our deaths. Give them their meaning. Give them an end to the war and a true peace. Give them a victory that ends the war and a peace afterwards. Give them their meaning."
We were young, they say, we have died, remember us. Come, let us worship together.
As John, Karen, and Gwyneth Nakata come forward to light the chalice, please rise in body and or in spirit to speak the words printed in our order of celebration and on the screen. We light this flame of memory, recalling the years past that have brought us to this hour, and countless lives, known and unknown, that make our lives possible. We light this flame of faith, that our minds might be enlightened, and our love deepened, and our path illuminated by understanding and peace. Thank you for that lovely musical offering. We gather each week, not for our needs alone, but to bear witness to our joys and sorrows, triumphs and disappointments. In this living sanctuary, we come together as companions on life's journey. When I hold up my arms, I invite you to say, "We hold you in our hearts." If you are living through the small and extraordinary milestones of life, we hold you in our hearts. If parenting is your spiritual practice, we hold you in our hearts. If you are mourning a loss, we hold you in our hearts. If you live with or care for someone with grief or chronic pain, we hold you in our hearts. If you are struggling with illnesses, seen and unseen, with mental illness and addictions, we hold you in our hearts. If you have suffered abuse or injustice, we hold you in our hearts. In our Cedar Lane community, we celebrate with joy Kathy and Stu Grumman's 40th wedding anniversary. A big congratulations to Kristen Green, our intern minister, who received her Master's of Divinity from Wesley Theological Seminary on Monday, May 13. This summer, Kristen will be relocating to Newark, Delaware, where she has accepted a chaplain residency at Christiana Medical Center. Congratulations, Kristen. Our caring extends beyond Cedar Lane to others whose lives are lost or impacted by violence and calamities in our world, especially this week. We mourn the deaths of 3 transgender women of color: Michelle Simon, also known as Tamika, Malaysia Booker, and Claire Legato, who were killed in separate acts of anti-transgender violence. The death of a 16-year-old Guatemalan boy, Carlos Hernandez Vasquez, at a border patrol station in South Texas, the 5th death of a minor since December. We hold you in our hearts. May these friends of ours, our companions of the world, and all that lies unspoken in our hearts, be held in the embrace of prayer, and by our love that will never let us go. Amen.
I invite you to fully arrive in this space. Breathe together. find your stillness. This air we breathe, each breath we take, is shared across time with our ancestors, with those we have lost, so each breath, each inhale and exhale remembers them. We hold many joys and sorrows, gratitudes and concerns. Some of them we can speak, and some of them we do not yet have the words. May our breath during this sacred time that we have carved out, may our breath be all the prayer that we need. And in this sacred silence that we hold together during this time, I invite those who are mourning a loss or remembering the anniversary of a loss to stand and also be held in this silence. May all feel the embrace of a love that will not let us go. You may be seated.
To make. I heard that some people might be late today because of rolling thunder. And immediately in my mind, I started thinking, okay, we can reach out to We Care chairs, you know, those neighborhoods on your name tag. There are people in charge of your neighborhood, and when bad things happen, we reach out to those neighborhood chairs to activate your neighborhood to see if you need meals or rides. And I was like, okay, now what if someone has damage to their home? What resources can we activate? We've got the minister's discretionary fund at the ready. And then Babs Ricketts told me that rolling thunder is a motorcycle thing. But this is community. This is your community. And it is always at the ready to move with you in times of celebration, like 40th wedding anniversaries, the birth of children, and also at times of grief, calamity, and loss. As we enter this moment in our service for giving, I invite you to think about what this community means to you and means to others, to remember that if you haven't pledged yet, to please do so, because the matching is still happening from a group of generous donors as we move towards reaching our pledge goal. Today's offering will now be gratefully received.
Amor
for the gifts that we are and the gifts that we bring and share to make this a beloved community. May we be grateful. Thank you, members of the choir, for that beautiful, beautiful offering. Good morning. Good morning. It's wonderful to see you all on this beautiful, beautiful day. Every year we get another chance to ponder the meaning and purpose of Memorial Day and how it has evolved over time and according to our national mood. Memorial Day, originally known as Decoration Day, started after the Civil War to honor the Union and Confederate dead. According to David Blight, a history professor at Yale, the earliest commemoration of Memorial Day was held on May 1st, 1865, when thousands of newly free African Americans and others in Charleston, South Carolina, pooled their efforts to give proper burial to several hundred Union soldiers in a ritual of remembrance and consecration. And another founding story is about a group of grieving women of the North and South who gathered at a cemetery in Columbus, Mississippi, and in a radical act of reconciliation, placed flowers on all the soldiers' graves. During World War I, Memorial Day expanded to recognize all American lives lost in battle, not just those in the Civil War. And it wasn't until World War II that the holiday gained a strong following and a national identity. And it was officially named Memorial Day until 1971, when the federal government designated Memorial Day as a national holiday on the last Monday in May each year, ensuring a 3-day weekend and giving the day its current status as the unofficial beginning of summer. Now, when we look at the Memorial Day observances over the years, they evoke certain truths about the American ideal, about striving for justice and equality, about falling short of our ideals, about coming to terms with our falling short and moving forward together. Now, this truth is still real for us, laying bare our collective grief so that we can comfort one another. What Memorial Day doesn't try is to change the loss of life into something good. It doesn't try to tell us why these things we people do, war, hate, torture, are somehow all right. It simply acknowledges loss and the need to reckon and reconcile ourselves with it and with each other. Yet, today's Memorial Day has become a 3-day weekend festival for bargain deals, beach-going, barbecues, and baseball games, far removed from any context or awareness of the terrible costs of war. Now, it is not the first time that free market capitalism has hijacked the intended meaning of a holiday. We see the same kind of ahistorical interpretation of Mother's Day, which was itself a product of 19th century anti-war movements led by people like Unitarian Julia Ward Howe, author of the Battle Hymn of the Republic at the beginning of the Civil War, and later towards the end of the Civil War, who came out with a Mother's Day proclamation, a feminist and pacifist statement against war. But Memorial Day also began with the conviction that to properly honor the war dead, it is necessary to honestly contemplate and question the course for which they fought and died. Yet today, we continue to fight and continue to propose wars on false premises. As a nation, we have been at war since 2001 in the Middle East, in Central Asia, in North and East Africa, and the islands of Southeast Asia. A whole generation has been born into this unending conflict, and we will soon have service members who have never known a time when this country was not at war. As of today, we have lost 6,997 service members since 2001 directly in battle or in support of hostilities abroad, the overwhelming majority of whom are poor or working class white people and people of color. We have lost many more to suicide and the after effects of military service at an average rate of 20 veteran suicides each day. We have contributed to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people worldwide by bombing their homes, destroying their livelihoods, decimating their cultures, and prompting a refugee crisis in the Middle East. We have spent more than $5 trillion at the expense of all else to feed and nurture the military-industrial complex, while we have allowed our nation's infrastructure and schools to rot away and truck our younger generation with billions of dollars in debt. And now, the warmongers are at it again against Iran. While the president shamelessly exploits Memorial Day by contemplating pardons for some service members or military contractors accused or convicted of war crimes in order to appease some of his base and fringe media figures. Somehow it feels like there is no turning point on the horizon. Yet, we know continued military engagement will not bring peace. It will cause only more death and waste and destruction, all of it unaccountable, most of it invisible to all but its victims. And there are always victims. Entire communities overseas live in fear, wondering if the next plane overhead will be their last. We cannot allow bargain sales, parades and revelry, and uncritical support of foreign policy to distract or remove the context in which so many young service members have died. Serving alongside comrades in a war without purpose, without end. Nor can we, by virtue of being privileged, ignore the impact of war waged on other countries, pretend that untold numbers who have been killed in our name across the world are tragic and justifiable statistics. We cannot ignore that many more will die of their wounds, be they physical or mental. Our veterans will return home to dwindling prospects and quiet resignation to their class. We need to ask ourselves, what goal is worth the cost of so many lives? What redress is possible to those who go to war and come of age in that place and time? What sense might we make of what we do now and in the future as a result of really acknowledging the costs of war? What do we owe those, the young dead soldiers who do not speak? What do we owe those young soldiers who do come back alive but changed forever? I know these are uncomfortable questions that may be deemed unpatriotic or even treasonous to be raising at any time, much less on the day we remember our war dead. Must we never ask these questions without sounding like we don't cherish American values or respect our service personnel, opting instead to salute a flag and a uniform to a representation of fidelity and sacrifice for which we cannot explain a purpose? I take heart in James Baldwin's prophetic admonition. I love America more than any other country in this world, and exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. So, my friends, this Memorial Day, between barbecues and beach trips, bargain deals and baseball, let us remember. Let us remember our war dead. Let us remember the price they paid. Let us remember the price their families pay. Let us remember the physical and psychic wounds that the survivors of war carry with them till the end of their days. Let us remember the lives never lived. Let us remember the horrors unleashed upon civilian populations. Let us remember the costs of war, that the costs are always much larger, much more lasting than even the lines of graves and the lines on a budget. Let us remember the loss of possibility. Let us recognize, remember, and honor those who served and continue to serve. Let us give thanks for all those who work to heal the wounds of war and violence in all its forms. Let us listen, let us learn, and let us work and hope for peace and for the courage to heal in our lives and in our love. May it be so. Amen. This Memorial Day weekend, we remember all who died in our wars. Our roll call reminds us that these are not nameless people who serve.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies.
We remember the 625,000 who died in the Civil War, 116,516 in World War I, 406,000 in World War II, 54,246 in the Korean War.
We remember the 58,220 who died in the Vietnam War, 1,562 in the first Iraq War, 2,426 in Afghanistan, and 4,571 in Iraq.
We remember the thousands of soldiers who died by suicide after leaving the armed forces.
We remember the 33 U.S. service people killed since May 2018. Ensign Sarah Joy Mitchell, Staff Sergeant James Grottian, Staff Sergeant Taylor J. Galvin, Major Tad Purvis.
For amber waves are of grain.
Petty Officer Jason Finnan, Chief Warrant Officer Jonathan Farmer, Specialist Jackson Johnson, Sergeant Holly Walensky,
For Purple Mountain Majesties.
Specialist Ryan Riley, Specialist Michael Osario, Private First Class Michael Thomason, Army Sergeant First Class Mihail Golan.
Above the fruited plain.
Corporal Joseph Maciel, Sergeant First Class Christopher Celis, Staff Sergeant Ramon Rarorgo, Command Sergeant Timothy Williard,
America, America.
Staff Sergeant Diobanjo San Agustin, Specialist James Slape, Major Brent Taylor, Sergeant Leandro Hasso.
God shed his grace on thee.
Staff Sergeant Dylan Elgin, Captain Andrew Ross, Sergeant First Class Eric Emmond, Sergeant Jason McClary,
And crown thy good.
Private First Class Joshua Mikhaski, Sergeant Cameron Meddock, Staff Sergeant Joshua Beely, Sergeant First Class Will Lindsay, Specialist Joseph Collette.
With brotherhood.
Corporal Robert Hendricks, Sergeant Benjamin Hines, Staff Sergeant Christopher Slutman, Staff Sergeant Albert Miller, Specialist Miguel Holmes.
We invite you now to speak the names of your beloved ones, fallen comrades, grandparents, parents, siblings, spouses and partners, mentors and friends, and children. We speak their names into this receiving silence that we have not forgotten, and in honor of their service. Let the naming begin.
On this Memorial Day, we also recognize those among us who are serving currently and have served in the past in our armed services. I invite those who are currently serving or have served to please rise in body or spirit. I invite the family members of those who have served or are currently serving our country to please rise and be recognized. Thank you all for your service, your struggle, and your sacrifice. You may be seated. And to all those here remembering, may life bless us in our going out and our coming in our grief and in our joy, in our remembering and in our forgetting. And may we live while we are alive, for life is brief in its days, and even though thus shadowed with loss, life can also be beautiful.
From sea to shining sea.
Today we honor our fallen soldiers and all who have served, people who dedicated themselves, put their entire lives on the line for the very best that our country promises it can be. They've sacrificed for us and struggled not just through hours of training and difficult choices, but some still struggle. I dream of a world of peace, of living in a time where there is clean water for all to drink and abundant food and health care for every human being. But colonialism, patriarchy, white, cis, heteropatriarchy specifically still rule this day. And we still need our warriors, people willing to run towards danger so that others can run from it. Because there are times when talking and negotiation fails, when armed tyrants rise up, and I wonder if there's no other recourse. Sometimes these warriors are laying down in front of bulldozers or escorting women at Planned Parenthood centers. Sometimes they are police officers, firefighters, or other emergency personnel, and sometimes they are our soldiers. Are you able to spiritually prepare a soldier for war? A military chaplain friend of mine asked me that question back in seminary when I was discerning whether or not to apply for military chaplaincy. I blinked back at him and paused. I hadn't considered that I'd need to do that. Would I have to enter into difficult spaces with soldiers experiencing moral conflict or trauma? Sure. I'd been training to be a part of a spiritual care team to respond to mass casualty incidents like major disasters, mass shootings, plane crashes, and the like. I had specialty training to deal with first responders and victims of these tragedies. I expected that I might encounter similar issues as a military chaplain. I was prepared to assist with services, memorials, funerals, and live out our UU values by supporting soldiers and meeting spiritual needs that our open, liberal faith uniquely qualifies its ministers to do. In fact, I was excited as a Latina and a minister to enter into a bastion of white, cis, heteropatriarchy to hold space for change. But prepare a soldier for war. to hold the complexities and the burdens that come with preparing for and engaging in war, and then navigate a system that does not support veterans when they return home. That I wasn't sure about. So I sat with the question. Nevertheless, I was keenly aware of my forming call to both parish ministry and military chaplaincy, and began the process of pursuing both as I delved into answering these questions while navigating the cognitive dissonance and spiritual dissonance of protesting for peace while considering buttoning up a military uniform. I also found out that our UU chaplains have been mistreated at public UU events because they wear a uniform, and began to learn that for some of us in our faith, there isn't space to hold the struggle of serving our country and living our faith. And this was heartbreaking news for me. I believe our faith makes space for us to do both. We are each and every one of us called to listen to our own spiritual compasses and move in the direction of what we deem as truth, while remaining in accountable relationship to each other. Our 7 principles are a guide, not a credo. And it is possible, in fact, I think it's essential to bring the amazing inclusiveness of our saving faith to all spaces, including military service. And I recognize that not everyone would agree, and our covenant and principles call us to do this, though. I invite us to be open and in loving dialogue as we explore how our shared faith can hold us all within its loving embrace, while still calling us to be more, to do better. I found out quickly that I was too old to enter the process for active duty. Yet somewhere inside of me, there was a call that wouldn't be denied, so I kept trying to answer those questions and believed that Spirit would open the way. My father was an Army veteran. My dad's time in the service ended in 1968. He was a sharpshooter. He was a really quiet person, which might be shocking for you to imagine. And he would laugh when he talked about his service buddies, but every once in a while, this shadow would come over his eyes and his stories would end. My uncle was an Air Force mechanic in Vietnam. His job, in addition to attending to mechanical issues, was to load bodies of fallen soldiers on planes so they could go home. He still has nightmares, and both of them would serve again if called. My dad affirmed the importance of military service until his passing, and my uncle continues to reiterate the need for dedicated soldiers to defend democracy and hold the line as a last resort when all else fails. Their fierce dedication to our country and commitment to serve something larger than themselves lives in my heart and has been central to my call. But could I prepare a soldier for war? Could I prepare a person to truly bear the burden of the work and move past their time of service, knowing their lives would forever be changed and that our current system might not support them when they re-entered? I've been protesting war since I was a young child. I believe in demilitarization as an essential component to world peace. And yet I've also always supported our military. What I wondered, would it mean for me if I were to commit to serve? Would I feel in alignment with my core beliefs surrounding peaceful resistance and not just wear the uniform, but be able to serve the population honestly and fully? And would the congregation I serve accept this service? 2 weeks ago, my hands were shaking when I placed my head cover on and dressed in my dress blues, my formal uniform for the Civil Air Patrol. The Civil Air Patrol formed during World War II for national defense and service. The current mission of the Civil Air Patrol is to support America's communities with emergency response, diverse aviation and ground services, youth development, and promotion of air, space, and cyber power. The cadets I work with train in character development, aerospace technology, and some are training to do emergency service relief efforts, which is essential as climate change alters the scape of our lives. I serve the cadets as part of my work and outreach in our community. There, I'm a chaplain candidate going through the process with the U.S. Air Force as an auxiliary military chaplain. I work with an amazing group of young people and adults. I reach a population in my service with the Civil Air Patrol that Cedar Lane hasn't reached yet in Montgomery County, and it's awesome to be a part of moving our faith beyond these walls without having to leave this community. That said, I have to be honest, the day I first put on my dress blues, I was headed to the funeral for a veteran who had recently passed. It was my first time in uniform, and that cap felt like it weighed several pounds. In some ways, my uniform is like the stoles ordained clergy wear in worship. It represents to whom I am accountable, to whom I serve. But unlike my stole, my uniform was a weight I didn't realize I would be carrying. That first day I wore that uniform, it made it clear to me that lugging around a 50-pound rucksack and running miles is just the beginning of our uniformed warriors' burdens, the beginning of carrying mental, emotional, and physical burdens that some of us may never understand. These are deeply spiritual, ethical, and moral burdens, and what lightens them differs greatly from person to person. Sometimes it's faith in our democracy, faith in our country. Sometimes it's the love of family, the belief in something holy. Sometimes it's something else. In our faith tradition, we saw a rise in humanism after World Wars I and II, as a way to cope with the atrocities of war and the damage to our soldiers, as well as the staggering loss of life. While our saving faith, rooted in hope, reconciliation, and the promise of salvation for all, can be a salve to someone suffering, part of my role is also to know when to engage someone with resources. Dr. Miriam Reisman stated in a recent study that as many as 500,000 U.S. troops who served in the many wars over the past 13 years have been diagnosed with PTSD. We expect that it's 20 to 30% that are actually suffering. Many cases go unreported. Heavy is this burden our soldiers bear for us all. Quality mental health care is needed to support our veterans before deployment, throughout deployment, and upon their return. I'm glad that this congregation honors our veterans and takes time in our service to honor those who have fallen. To do so is an act of gratitude and faith. But our shared faith also calls us to act on our beliefs. We have a responsibility to ensure that our warriors are not deployed for ego, colonialism, someone else's resources, or for any other reason beyond what they are intended to serve for. Furthermore, all genders and sexual orientations should feel safe and cared for as they serve. We must hold our leaders accountable. Did you all know that Eileen Louie coordinates a magazine drive each month? She and her small team gather magazines and collate them and then distribute them to Walter Reed. This caring pastoral ministry is always looking for volunteers, and this is a way to provide pastoral support that goes beyond these walls. Can you spiritually prepare a soldier for war? I can answer that question now. The answer is yes, because the current world needs its warriors in its many forms, and our saving space makes space. This faith makes space for peacemaking and leading. It makes space to escort women into Planned Parenthood. It makes space for all of our warriors. I leave you with words that we began by, from Archibald MacLeish. They say, "We give you our deaths. Give them their meaning. Give them an end to the war and a true peace. Give them a victory that ends the war and a peace afterwards. Give them their meaning." As we move forward from this space, I ask you, how will you care for yourself if you are a warrior? How will we all care for our warriors? And how can we apply the tenets of our faith to build a more just, peaceful world? Amen, and blessed be.
I invite us now to enter into the spirit of prayer, reflection, and meditation with these words from the Reverend Barbara Peskin. Spirit of life, whom we have called by many names in thanksgiving and in anguish, bless the poets and those who mourn. Send peace for the soldiers who did not make the wars, but whose lives were consumed by them. Let strong trees grow about graves far from home. Breathe through the arms of their branches. The earth will swallow your tears while the dead sing, "No more, never again, remember me." For the wounded ones and those who received them back, let there be someone ready when the memories come, when the scars pull and the buried metal moves, and forgiveness for those of us who were not there for our ignorance. And in us, veterans in a forest of 1,000 fallen promises, let new leaves of protest grow on our stumps. Give us courage to answer the cry of humanity's pain, and with our bare hands, out of full hearts, with all our intelligence, let us create the peace. Free to grieve, free to remember, free to be teary if that's what flows, free to smile if that's what flows. Let the names of those people with whom we are in relationships of comfort or concern flow in our hearts. Let them flow as we recognize that our freedom is bound up with all the other freedoms that exist and flow like graceful streams through our day-to-day lives. Free us to live, O Spirit, not alone, but in a communion of forgiveness, and free us never to do so much to relive as to live. Grace, amaze us ever with yourself. Where we feel wretched, lost, or sad, fill us with the music that reminds us that we live not alone, but in harmony with all that is. The life that sustains us, affirms us, guides us, we say, Shalom, Salam, Om Shanti, Amen. Blessed be. Please rise in body and or in spirit to join in singing one more step. The words are on screen and in the gray hymnal.
More
Nice to hear you sing.